I became Artistic Director of Theatre Centre in 2007. I've been a freelance director for about 7 years, working with loads of different contexts, different types of plays. For me, what was really attractive to running Theatre Centre was, one, its new writing mission, as well as its focus on young audiences. Now, I come from my training and my alma mater, so to speak, was 784 Scotland, which was again a touring company like Theatre Centre, going to unusual settings like Theatre Centre. The reach was incredibly intricate like Theatre Centre, but also was at 784 we did new writing as well. And the reason why 784 did new writing was because politics has to be contemporary, it has to be present, it has to be relevant, and it has to be completely informed by the now. And you can't do that with classics. You can do that with new writing. And for me, to do new writing for young audiences, where we're looking at plays which are looking at the world from a contemporary worldview, from the young people's point of view, was absolutely what I felt I was put on this planet to do. So the first play I ever directed for young audiences was in the mid-90s, I think around 1996, and I was working for 784 Scotland at the time, and we were asked, or I was did some work with an organisation called WALE, which stands for Wester Hales Arts Leisure Education, and Wester Hales is a scheme on the outskirts of Edinburgh. And so we got together, and one of their writers wrote a play called Bully Bulldozer, and it was an anti-bullying play for children in primary school. And I worked with Andy Manley, who's now revered international superstar of children's theatre. And so me and Andy Manley kind of worked on that tiny little project together. And it was a very basic production. I did some performances at the Edinburgh Festival, as well as touring around community centres, around schemes in Edinburgh. But it was really interesting working with Andy and seeing his approach, and working with the young people that were in the show, and also seeing how a young audience kind of engaged with a piece of theatre, however crude that might have been. So that, I would say, was my very, very first production for children, young audiences, ever. In commissioning writers, I have to say there is no formula for me, but I would say there is probably a rough draft that I kind of follow, and that's to do with building a relationship. So when I see a writer, meet a writer, or see someone's work, and I like it, and there's something in that work that I go, there's usually something in that piece of work that I've seen or I've read, or something in the way that writer talks, that I go, there's something that excites me as a director, but there's something that they've got to offer to a young audience. It might be to do with the subject matter of the particular play that I'm looking at. It might be the way they draw a character, their dialogue, or it might be something within the structure or dramaturgy of the play itself. I have several bits of advice for writers that are interested in writing for schools, and this really comes from my own experience and what I've learnt on the job. So writers might find other things valuable, but writing for a school environment, first thing you need to think about as a writer is that school environment, and the challenges that presents. School halls, you're not necessarily always in a drama studio, and we're presuming that you haven't got lights here as well. So when you're going into a school hall, it's quite a dead environment in that the acoustics may not be brilliant, you've got no lights, your set is on the flat floor, so you've got maybe some sightline issues. You might have the dinner ladies behind the hatch, Radio 1, you've got bells going, etc., etc. So you've got to really focus the theatre experience, the encounter, into the action of the play. And so your play has to be very, very robust. It has to be very taut. The action needs to be absolutely precise and specific all the way through. That 55-60 minutes has to, I feel for me, has to be like a narrative roller coaster. It has to be cohesive, but you have to constantly be engineering the play so that your audience's attention and focus is constantly on the way the action moves, not only within the plot and the characters, but within the physicality on stage. So you need to make sure you have a very taut plot, taut narrative, but you also need to create, as a writer, room within the production to create those physical moments so that you can use physicality and the movement across that space to kind of focus and move the audience's attention. So those are two things that I do as a director or when I'm working with a writer. It's all quite an old adage which is used quite a lot, but is to get into scenes late and leave them early. You'll find with young people that you don't need to say quite a lot for them to get the point. So if you have quite a meandering scene in a school hall where you're trying to do a lot of setup, you probably don't need a lot of that because you just need to get to the point of action which is going to move the story on. So there's can be sometimes within drafting a bit of an editing process that happens to make a play as tight as it possibly can be and to keep it as robust as it can be. Really understand or really get to know why you want to write a play for young audiences. It doesn't necessarily have to be a play for theatre centre, but you really, I think, need to know not just why you want to write, but why do you want to write for young audiences, and what is it that you want to be questioning or asking or telling that young audience. Also, I'm really interested in writers that don't necessarily go for the bleeding obvious subject matter when they're writing for young audiences. Young people are not of one mind. They are a variety and diversity of interests, opinions, outlooks, faiths, communities. You can still write about incredibly complex emotional world when you're writing for children, and I think it's about being able to sort of really tap into that sort of inner child that everybody has and bringing that out in one's work. Unfortunately, there are less and less writers there's less and less opportunities for writers to write original new plays for young people. There seems to be a sort of a dependence on writers adapting other writers' work. But those writers that have got those opportunities to write original plays tend to be the ones that are more in touch with their inner child.